You're listening to the Wellness Evolution Community Podcast. I'm Dr. Christine Smith, and this is where your body becomes something you understand again, because symptoms aren't failures. They're your body's most honest attempt to protect you. Each episode, we decode those patterns with root cause physiology, nervous system insight, and metaphors that make your biology feel alive, understandable, and trustworthy. You are smart. Your body is designed to heal. Let's remember how together. One of the things that's not talked about enough in healthcare is the concept of how lonely a health experience can be. And you can go to all the right people and feel really taken care of at those appointments. And then in between, feel like the loneliest person on the planet. And a lot of people don't talk about the identity crisis that happens when you get injured or you have a health crisis, where you just don't even know who you are anymore because you feel like you've lost everything that makes you yourself. And that was why I ended up moving more towards teaching, and the way that I practice now is because it's very easy to give someone some protocol and have them get somewhat better. But if you really want people to heal, if you really want them to get better in a sustainable way where they don't backslide and they have tools and resources that they can use on their own, so they're not constantly dependent on a provider, the only way to do that is to teach them. It's that whole teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. So I ended up making these programs because I wanted people to have some point of contact in between our appointments. I wanted them to feel cared for. I wanted them to feel like they had a friend, like they had community. There have been scientific studies that show that people heal significantly better in community. So group programs can be incredibly helpful. But even so, there's some things that you just can't do in something live as easily or in a one-to-one appointment. So in some of my programs, I even made a whole video taking people on a tour through the grocery store, showing them how to shop, showing them how to read labels, showing them how to understand what's on the labels, showing them how to perimeter shop, showing them which things to avoid, showing them my thinking process behind when I'm picking out meats and quality meat and understanding where meat comes from, and just helping people tap back into what our ancestors used to have around food, which was we used to know how it was sourced. We used to be involved in the ritual of taking the life of an animal and thanking it so that it could become our flesh and our energy and our life force. We've been completely removed from that. You just go, you buy your ground meat, you go home. So if I can help people kind of come back into that ecosystem and get back in touch with the concept of local farmers and local food and how to support a local ecosystem, and realizing that the most power that you'll ever have is voting with your dollar. Like, if you don't want to see animals treated poorly, buy from the farm that treats their animals right. And the solution isn't necessarily always wiping something out. It's just modifying it into the best version possible. And when I can start to teach people these things, then we can go through and I can help them understand how the body actually enters a healing state. So rather than just being like, here's your protocol, take these pills, it is, this is how your body heals. This is how I want you to listen to your body. This is the stage that it's in now based on these things that it's saying. So, are you feeling inflamed and you have a headache and you're feeling grumpy and groggy and brain foggy and bloated and you don't feel good? Well, this is your body in a state that I like to call halt. It's inflamed. It's usually stuck in some kind of chronic inflammation cycle. It's usually injured in some way. And halt is where, like in healing an injury, it's called hemostasis, which means slowing of the blood. But this is where the body slows stuff down. And it takes a look around and it goes, what needs to be done? What is going on here? What needs to, be prevented from bleeding out? And what do we need to do to repair? And if people can realize when they're in this state, they realize that they can't keep pushing themselves in that way. Because when you keep pushing yourself and you keep pushing that thing to the back of your mind, and you keep not feeling your emotions, and you keep ignoring your back pain, and you keep pushing through your knee pain, and you keep pushing through the bloated gut, that is when you end up developing some disease, some condition, some autoimmune thing. It's when you push past all of the signals that your body is screaming at you with a megaphone. It is not normal to have a headache. We should not be having a headache every day or every couple of days and thinking that's a normal thing. If you're having a headache, it's usually your body asking you to do something like drink more water or get some body work or get some more sleep or change your mineral capacity in the body. There's so many things that your body's asking for with a simple headache. Or if you are having gut distress, your body is often asking you, hey, can you not eat that thing? Or can you not eat these things together? Or can you eat this thing first and then do less of this thing? And if you can learn how to speak that language where you check in with that and you realize, oh, hey, I am not feeling great today. I am feeling bloated today. I am feeling upset today. Maybe I should change what I'm doing tomorrow and mitigate this. So, if you have a day where you're feeling terrible and bloated and awful, then maybe the next day you actually don't eat as much and you focus on drinking some bone broth and having something really light with some protein. Or maybe you just focus on the bone broth for the day and you let your body catch up and you let it recover and you let it heal. And this is how our body becomes sustainable over time and we have our longevity for life. Because one of the more damaging things you can do to your body is overeat and overdrink. It turns on a whole different pathway in your liver that is much more stressful to process that. And a lot of people forget that your gut, because we don't really see it, right? We forget about our intestines. We don't think about them a lot. They're a really cool mechanism. But when we overeat, they stretch and then they stretch some more and then they stretch some more and then they stretch some more. And it can actually create like little perforations and little tears and little areas that are upset from this overstretching. And then all this fluid comes in and then you get bloated and then or the bloating is from a gas because you haven't been eating the right things and your microbiome is disrupted. And these days in our society, with all of our cleanliness, all of our antimicrobials, all the alcohol we drink, which is an antibiotic. When you drink alcohol, you're drinking an antibiotic, you're killing your microbiome. So when we take all this into our body, we forget how much we are actually disturbing the rainforest of our body, this beautiful ecosystem that regulates everything. So if I can teach people how to recognize these stages, then we can actually start to heal the body. So the first things first is intention. We have to get the signals from the mind correct going to the body. If you're living in a place in your brain where you don't trust anything and you are waiting for the next shoe to drop in your life, you're afraid to turn the corner because you're waiting for this thing to happen, you're waiting for the bill to come, you're waiting for this next problem to happen, and that's where you spend most of your time and that's where you live, your immune system is going to get that signal. And your immune system is going to live in the same place and it's always going to be a little bit on the defense. And then you're going to have allergies and depression and leaky gut and autoimmune stuff. And so if we can realize that our mind and the signals that we're sending to the body are the most powerful drug we will ever have, then we can really start making progress. Because people demonize the placebo effect in research because it negates the thing that they want to find out. But the placebo effect should be used as a therapeutic agent on its own. The fact that people can take a sugar pill and their body can produce a chemical like an actual medication could means that your body can already produce that chemical by itself. So if we can figure out how to direct it correctly with the mind, you can change your chemistry with your mind alone. And this is all the research that Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing, that a bunch of other people are doing and collaborating on. And I think this is really powerful. They've even been working on a study where they show that in advanced meditators, it prevents viruses from being able to enter the cell. The chemistry that's produced from meditation prevents a virus from being able to enter your cell. So this is often why when people are in a better regulated nervous system state, they're less likely to get sick because their immune system is functioning better. So we get that intention first, and then we move into the halt phase. And halt is all about looking around, seeing what needs to be done, seeing what needs to be repaired, and stopping damage. After the halt phase, then we move into our excavation phase. Excavation is like tilling the soil. So halt, we're like laying some soil for our garden bed. And then excavation is about tilling the soil and pulling out whatever's in the way and not going to be useful. And this can be infections, this can be overgrowths, this can be bad thoughts, right? So this model not only applies to your body, but it also applies to your thought processes. And that's why I love this model. This model, which I lovingly call the IHEAL model, that's the acronym we're going through. This model is really based on the intelligence of nature. Nothing will ever beat the intelligence of nature. So why would we not direct our health and our care in the same order that nature does her magic? So we focus on the intention, and then we focus on what needs to be done. Then we start to take bad things out of the way. And then after those bad things are out of the way, we have room to plant the seeds of good. So if you're working on the gut, this is the time when you would do probiotics and nutrients and things like that. If you're working on the mind, this is where you start to insert the thoughts that you want. So instead of having a thought of fear, you might remove the thought of fear and say, I feel courage. And that would be inserting the good thought. So you can do this with so many things in life. You can even do this with your finances. You can do it with your relationships. You can do it with your loved ones, with your friends. But it's figuring out, well, what do I want to create? What needs to be done? What can I remove that's in the way? What can I put that is missing? And then the last part is longevity. We test it out in the healing component. Like when a cell is healing, we call this the remodeling phase. Remodeling is super important. This is where we kind of challenge stuff and challenge the tissues in a way where they can grow and lengthen in the right direction and get structure and integrity in the right places from these challenges. The challenges are like feedback. And in our lives, this would be, or if we go back to the garden metaphor, this is like a plant growing that weathers a storm. As long as it has the right resources, the storm actually makes it stronger. And we have to test these things out, which is why PT is so important after physical injury, right? That's the remodeling phase. It teaches your body how to structure that tissue. If you don't do your exercises and you don't do your PT and you don't do movement after an injury or a surgery, you're going to end up with a bunch of wonky scar tissue, and it's going to pull things in the wrong direction, and it's going to start to inhibit your kinetics. But if we can do the remodeling phase, it doesn't ever end up doing that, because when the body's healing, it comes down and just kind of lays down some resources to the immune system. It goes, here you go, take care of it. The immune system kind of lays it down, but then the remodeling is what structures it. So that is what I lovingly call the IHEAL cycle. That is the foundational knowledge for all healing of all systems in the universe, including ecosystems, our planet, businesses, anything where things are collaborating and working together. It all works the same way. That is just kind of a universal law. So now we take this universal law and we can apply it to the different organ systems in the body. So we come back to the first organ system, and we come back to the brain and the intention and how we're thinking. And if we come back to that first system, I lovingly call this system align. And this means getting aligned with yourself, aligned with your thinking, and aligned with the signals from your brain to your body. Align is all about rescuing your nervous system, really. Because we live in a world and an environment where everything is so incredibly overstimulating and overtaxing and pulling us in so many directions that if you ask me what the number one thing that comes into my office is that people need help with, it's their nervous system, hands down. And it doesn't matter what nutrition you give people if their nervous system is in a state where their cells have entered what's called a cell danger response. The cell danger response is where the cells kind of tighten up and their linings are no longer fluid. You can't get nutrients into the cell and you can't get toxins out of the cell. So if you start pounding somebody with supplements who's in a cell danger response, they're either just going to go through them or they're going to make it worse. And so it's much more important to actually work with the nervous system first and get them out of that state so that they are able to absorb nutrients. And this is really what led me down the career path I'm on now, was studying this relationship between the body and the brain. I've worked in multiple psych labs that have studied the relationship between emotions and how they affect chemistry in the body and how the body affects the brain and the signals that go back and forth. And ultimately, it all comes back to understanding the different levels of your brain and your nervous system and how to moderate them. And a lot of the time, I think people will work on the limbic brain, which is like the emotional brain, or more the neocortex, right? Traditional therapy more works with like the thinking brain and the neocortex. And it can be very helpful. And you definitely need to work through your thought patterns of a conscious experience of something. But then when you start doing something like somatic therapy, then you start working at the limbic brain level. You're working with the emotions. Subconscious techniques like NLP do this as well. That's like neuro-linguistic programming. Psych-K is another one. Rapid rewire method, neuroemotional technique. Any of these, they're working with often the limbic brain and helping someone to process the emotion of something, which actually is quite separate from the story. People think that they're the same, and so they'll get all wrapped up in their story. But the story is what your logical conscious mind is doing. The emotion is what your limbic brain is doing, and they're actually kind of processed differently. So if we can process this component of the limbic brain, then what we're left with is the brainstem. And I find the brainstem is the thing that gets missed the most. This is your lizard brain, your survival brain. We often address the neocortex, the thinking brain, and the emotional brain through our care. But the brainstem, this is where like breath work really plays a role. Breath work has a huge effect on the brainstem. There are other techniques that you can do as well that have to do with like touch or vibration and giving the body external sensation through our sensory pathways that then allows the neocortex to quiet and the brainstem to activate. And when this happens, we start entering basically an alpha brainwave state. It's a meditative state. So there are techniques that you can do that physically induce a meditative state in someone who hasn't been able to reach it on their own. And when you can do this, you start to rewire the brain. It's like downloading software and then restarting the computer. And when you're doing these techniques, it's quite cool because the sensory pathways basically activate the amygdala, but in a safe, subdued state. Your amygdala is like the filter of your brain. And it basically says, hey, is this safe? Is this okay in the environment? And if you can send it signals that are consistently safe, all of a sudden the hyperactivity and the hyper awareness of the amygdala starts to calm down because it starts to trust the environment while being activated. And these are like classic neurological techniques. So if you can address all these 3 layers of the brainstem and actually get them to kind of reboot, you would be astounded at what the body can do health-wise. This is why, like I had mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza before, this is why at his conferences, people get up out of wheelchairs and walk. And they have their blindness cured. They have their deafness cured from meditating alone. This is all just the power of the brain. Nothing else has changed. So just knowing that that's possible with the mind alone, we start with the align cycle. Once people know what they even want and what they even envision for their healing, then we can move into the next cycle, which is understanding our rhythm. And this is really working with our adrenal glands. And people forget how important they are. A lot of people try to heal their gut before they actually work with their stress or their adrenals, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. And it's because your adrenals are your backup reserve. They are your backup fuel, and they kind of monitor everything else and help to fill the gaps. So if they are fatigued because you don't sleep or you can't manage your blood sugar or you're completely stressed out or you just keep pushing and you never recover, your recovery is going to be in the tank because your backup generator is dead. So then if you have something where your energy gets shot, you have no backup generator to balance you. And rhythm, again, kind of goes back to the brainstem and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is this little nucleus that sits at the back of your eyes and where you receive light. And this is how we create our circadian rhythm. And these days, when we're, on our phones, on our computers all the time, it makes it really hard to keep a normal circadian rhythm. But if we can get people walking, something as simple as walking in the evening and in the morning and getting sunlight in their eyes at dusk and dawn with no sunglasses, you can start to reset someone's hormones from that alone. And if you can have them get that as a daily habit, it makes a huge difference. And this is especially for people where the first thing they do is look at the phone and the last thing that they do is watch TV until they fall asleep with the TV on, right? Because all of that light is completely messing up the rhythm of your body. It's messing up your hormones, it's messing up your inflammatory pathway. And even if you wear like blue blockers, it kind of helps the light, but the stimulus, it's a lot of dopamine on your phone and on your TV. And the stimulus of the dopamine actually activates the brain, changes your neurotransmitters, changes your hormones, changes your circadian rhythm. So rhythm is about grounding, learning how to tap into the Earth's magnetic field again, the most foundational things that we can do for our body. Drinking water, sleeping enough, getting sunlight, grounding in the earth, and just balancing yourself with all of your regular life tools. This is where we can do hot cold therapy as well, really good for the vagus nerve, but then learning the nuances of them, where if you are exhausted and stressed out and your adrenals are tanked, doing a 5-minute cold plunge is probably going to do more damage than good for you, because that is a stressor on your body where when your backup generator isn't working, it's going to be too much. So we have to get the adrenals to a place where they can tolerate a cold plunge. So there's ways that you can start with showering with cold water. And then maybe you just dunk your face in a bowl of ice water and you just do the face because there's a whole bunch of receptors there that have that same reaction. And then you move into doing like a 10-second cold plunge. And then eventually you make your way up to doing longer tolerance ones. But if your adrenals aren't working, it's not for you yet. And we can focus more on heat and other things, but it depends on what's going on for the person. Ultimately, focusing on sleep, water, sunlight, rhythm, and just getting an actual pattern for your body so it knows what to anticipate and expect, because our bodies are quite adaptable. But if we don't have a good routine, they're going to have a really hard time figuring out how to stay in balance. So after we finally get the adrenals a little bit balanced, then this is also where we can start to just ever so gently focus on energy. And I know when people come in, one of the things they complain about the most is that they're fatigued and they're exhausted and they have no energy. But we can't just dive into stimulating the energy pathways, because usually when you're that fatigued, it's because the energy system has broken down. So if we can gently start to focus on energy through mitochondrial health, and mitochondria are like the engines of your cells. They take all these different kinds of nutrients and they turn them into energy for us. ATP, that thing you learned about in high school called the Krebs cycle that everybody forgot about and thought was useless, but it's not. It's how your cells make energy every day, and it's actually really important. This can get disrupted, especially by things like toxins and stress and blood sugar fluctuations and all of these things combined together. Or if you get an infection or you have a big life event, can actually all affect your mitochondria. They're very sensitive little things, and it's really quite cool. They go through these processes called fission and fusion. It's much like a lava lamp. Like imagine the blobs in a lava lamp moving around. These are the energy factories of your cells, and they can actually combine and make better energy factories, which is part of what happens when you do things like cold plunge. Or they can kind of separate when you're in a time of stress so that you have energy in more parts of the cell. But as they separate, they don't become as efficient as when they fuse together. And this is often what we see when people are starting to have cognitive decline later in life, is that their mitochondria are stuck, separated into these little sections that aren't making energy as effectively because they can't do fusion anymore. So when we can very gently start to protect the mitochondria with things like antioxidants, think blueberries and CoQ10 and N-acetylcysteine and sulfur vegetables and colorful foods. These are the things that are going to start to protect the mitochondria. And carnitine, which is often found in meat, is one of the other nutrients that is one of the best things for driving them, because carnitine is the thing that moves fat from the outside of the mitochondria inside of it so that you can make energy, so that you can make hormones, so that you can make your sex hormones and steroid hormones. And it all starts there. So if the mitochondria aren't functioning, nothing else is going to function well. And that's why we have to start here. But we can't charge them up yet, because it's like a nuclear power plant. They can actually create toxic waste. So if you charge up a nuclear power plant while it still has holes, you're actually going to create more damage around you. So we have to start to patch the holes. How do we patch the holes? We actually work on the next phase of the 8 cycles, which is your gut. And the gut, if you think about it, if you think about what your intestines look like and then you think about what your brain looks like, they actually look incredibly similar. And they're mirrors of each other. Your gut is your second brain. It's called the enteric nervous system. It has more neurons in the enteric nervous system than a cat's brain. Let that land for a second. There are more neurons in your gut than there are in a cat's brain. So you have a whole other brain in your stomach. And when you start to look at it this way, you realize why food has such an effect on things. And if you start to get that permeability in the gut lining, this is where issues can occur, because we start to accidentally leak toxins into our bloodstream. And then you can even grow bad bacteria in the gut, especially when you're stressed out. You actually grow bad bacteria. You grow more bad bacteria when you're stressed. And then if you have leaky gut, the toxins from these guys can leak into the bloodstream. And then you get what's called endotoxemia, or subclinical levels of endotoxemia. And that just means toxic blood that's hard to identify, but is taking a slow toll on the body. So this is why leaky gut is such a big deal. I know a lot of people have heard of it, but this is why healing it is a really big deal. And as we start to heal the gut, which is made of epithelial tissue, which is like skin cells, right? We have our gut, which is epithelial tissue. We have our skin, which is epithelial tissue. And we have our blood vessels, which is epithelial tissue as well. And so as we start to heal all these types of tissues, they all mirror each other and they all start to heal. And if you have leaky gut, you can have leaky kidney, you can have leaky mitochondria, you can have a leaky blood-brain barrier. They are often tied together. So as we start to heal the gut, everything else starts to mirror it and heal alongside of it, because the gut is so profound in our health, because it's the second brain. It is this brain that interacts with the outside environment more than anything else, because as food travels through it, it has to analyze everything, look for pathogens, take care of you, protect you with your immune system, process the nutrients, turn it into something else, and then move it out of the body. And it's doing all of this work. And if we're stressed out at the same time, or we're dealing with a toxin exposure, it makes it even harder to do. But as we start to heal the gut by not overeating, by removing inflammatory foods, by getting rid of infections that are present, and focusing on basic nutrients like amino acids and glutamine and collagen, those things start to heal the gut lining. There's a lot of other things you can use to soothe things as you go, like aloe, but like N-acetyl D-glucosamine is another item that's very, very helpful for healing the gut lining. And as we actually start to heal up the gut lining, then we don't have these toxins leaking into our bloodstream anymore. And when we don't have toxins leaking into our bloodstream anymore, our immune system doesn't get as upset. And the toxins don't go to our brain and mess up our neurotransmitters. And the other beauty of healing the gut lining like this is once we get the inflammation down, all those neurons in there also start to calm down. And our gut is where our immune system goes. There's something called Peyer's patches. They're like hangouts for the immune system. It's where our immune system goes to, one, protect us, but two, learn how to operate. So if you have an inflamed gut, your immune cells are going to learn how to operate in a more inflamed way. And as we get the inflammation in the gut down, the immune cells start to learn, and they actually learn to operate in a less inflamed way. This is hugely relevant for autoimmune. You'll basically never find an autoimmune case where leaky gut hasn't been a part of it at some point, because this is where the immune system gets confused. So we really start working on the gut. And this is our fire. This is our fire center, our solar plexus, our digestion, our ability to break down and process life. Digestion and your gut is about so much more than food. It is about your ability to actually process things. So people who struggle with anxiety and worry, they tend to have gut issues because it all shows up in the gut, because they can't process it. They're just stuck in it. But if we can actually start to work with our emotions, and if you are someone who deals with anxiety, you can realize that you are part of your own problem and take responsibility for the shadow work that is a component of actually working through your anxiety and finding tools that work for you, and not blaming your environment and blaming everything around you, and realizing that you are in charge of that and you have the control over it. And it's all about shifting our perception of stress. Your gut's going to start to heal from that alone. So taking responsibility for our emotions, for ourselves, this is a huge component of this. As the gut lining starts to heal, then we can start to work on the immune system. And that's our next phase. So we've already finally healed the school where the immune system goes to learn. And so now we can start retraining the immune system. This is where we can pick it up a little bit, because usually when we go through toxins or some kind of stressful experience or some kind of illness, our immune system gets taxed, even if we're in an autoimmune state. And so if we need to upregulate the immune system, or we need to coordinate it a little bit, this is where we can actually start to finally use herbals and things like that. At this point, all I have often used with people is a lot of basic nutrients like amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. It's amazing what you can do if you just give the body the right signals and you trust it and you let it do its thing and you give it time, and then you respond to it when it needs a shift. And now we get to the point where we can use herbals like our ancestors used, or like we could use in traditional Chinese medicine, or, like our wise elders used in the past. And this is where we can start to help the immune system function again and realize what's an enemy and realize what's not. And you'd be amazed at how much meditation can come into this. And you can actually do meditations where you visually tell your immune system what you want it to do. And you tell it how you want it to be trained, and you tell it where to calm down, and you sit there in meditation and you can watch. Let's say you have rheumatoid arthritis and you have joint damage. You can sit there in meditation, you can watch your immune system calm down, and then you can watch it go into repair mode, and you can watch it start to repair the cartilage. This is all happening in your imagination, in your mind's eye. But from that, you are sending the signals to your immune system to start doing that thing. I was working with another client recently, and she's struggling with RA and a lot of inflammation. She was really frustrated. However, one of the things in her case is that she has everybody else do things for her, from checking her messages to making her appointments to buying her supplements to logging into the portal to tracking everything to taking notes. And there's a component of having an advocate that's really important, and I get that. But there's also a component that's even more important of taking responsibility for your case and realizing that when you are responsible for your health and you are feeling in control and knowing what's happening and knowing what to do and feeling like you know what action step to take, that gets translated to your immune system. And then your immune system feels like you're in control. And the immune system doesn't just stay in the state of like waiting for the next bad thing to happen. It feels like you have action steps. So we worked on a statement for her and imprinting this, simply by working on, as I take control of my case, I take control of my immune system. She was having shifts from just that alone. So as we start to shift into taking control of the case, the immune system starts to follow suit, and then we can train it whether it needs to come up or it needs to come down. And this is where we can work on it after we've repaired the gut. Once the immune system is functional and ready, now we can actually move in to things like weight loss, which is what most people are after, but they skip all these steps before they get there. This is how you have successful weight loss if you really want to lose weight. So people with the stubborn weight where you're like, I do all the right things and it's not working, it's because you skipped the earlier steps. So if we get to this step and we want to have weight loss, now the metabolism actually functions. Now when you want to move fat across the membrane of a mitochondria to burn for fuel, it's functional and you can do that. And then we can actually start moving things in the body. And because we prepared the gut, which is our detox exit, and we prepared the immune system, as we lose weight, our fat cells release toxins into the bloodstream. And as they release toxins into the bloodstream, we have to take care of these toxins. Because when we deal with environmental toxins or heavy metals or whatever we're exposed to just from our regular life, it gets stored in our fat cells as a safety mechanism. So when we start to lose fat cells, those toxins get released. This is why we needed the immune system functional. If it's hyperfunctional, it's going to freak out at all the toxins and create more damage than help because it's going to over-respond. If it is not functional and it's too low and we release the toxins, they're going to damage the tissues because nothing's picking them up. And there's ways that you can mitigate this by, using binders and other supplements and things, but nothing beats having a functioning immune system. So getting the signal right, and then starting to work on this metabolism and starting to get the engine churning, starting to get things moving. And it usually, if people are trying to do some kind of diet to get their metabolism turned over, they do it for like a month and they don't realize that it takes 4 weeks for your metabolism to start to shift. So they often stop their diet or whatever they're trying to do right as their metabolism is shifting. But if you can keep that going for like 90 days minimum, preferably a couple months, you're going to hit an accelerated upward trend where your body finally gets online because your chemistry's had a chance to shift. And now that the metabolism is working, we can actually move things around again without just damaging stuff. Now we can do a detox. Detox is one of the only modules that I lock for people because I need them to go through these other phases and I need their gut to be functioning before I'm open to them doing a detox. So I know there's a lot of trends and fads online of doing like a parasite cleanse and whatever. If you're a healthy person, it's probably okay. But if you try it and you feel worse, you were not ready for that. Your organ systems were not set up to receive that. So we have to prepare the body and the immune system to be able to receive a detox. And then this is where we can actually push the liver a little bit and we can bring things out of the tissues to move them. But fast detox is not better and it will usually create more damage. The key to detox is doing it slow and methodically and listening to your body and taking breaks when you need to. And if you go through some kind of toxin exposure like I did, it took me a couple years to really get the mold toxins out of my body. And it's an ongoing process because they bind to your DNA and it's hard to get them out. So it's a process of getting them back out of your cells that they've gone up into, and then getting them through your liver and then into your gut and then bound by a binder and then out. And sometimes the binder misses them. They go back into the bloodstream and resettle on the DNA and then you have to do it over again. So detox is this slow process depending on what you're doing. And that's a broad term, right? Detox can apply to a lot of things from heavy metals to mycotoxins and mold to bad gut bacteria and fungal infections and things like that. But we have to have all these other systems working in order to detox at a cellular level and move it in a safe way. Then, after we get things detoxed, the gut is working, the immune system is functioning, we've patched all the holes in the nuclear power plant, Now we're ready to go into charge, and we are ready to open up energy. And the detox cycle, I often call it release, because we are releasing all the stuff that's in the way so that we can make room to charge up the energy. And I will say one more thing about the release cycle. Detox is usually a time when you're doing emotional detox as well, because you've finally gotten your body healthy enough and resourced enough that you can process all the stuff that you put under the table. Because at some point, it's going to rear its head. And it might be now when you're ready to deal with it because you're going through a conscious detox, or it might be later in life when you get diagnosed with some condition because you never felt your feelings. But if you can do it now and you can feel your feelings as part of your detox, it will ultimately help you in the long run and for your longevity and for your health and preventing that nasty diagnosis down the road, because your emotions take a huge toll on your body when they are unprocessed and unfelt and unmet and unseen, and you're not meeting your own needs. And if you want to do shadow work around that, if you feel like it's wrong to feel your emotions, ask where that comes from. Ask who that's serving, because it's not serving you. It's for somebody else. And if you think it's wrong to feel your emotions, reflect on that, and then reflect on the fact that every single human in the world feels these emotions. So feeling shame about feeling them is pointless, not going to get you anywhere. Shame in itself is not a bad emotion. Shame lets us know that there's something that we want to shift. And so if we can look at our emotions in that way, that's how you do shadow work. And then you can realize that if you're people pleasing by not feeling your emotions, you're being manipulative and you're lying. And that's the shadow work of emotions, is you're not actually being truthful with what you're experiencing to other people. So there's so many ways to do this, but I do find that to be a component of detox, which is why that module is called release. It's about releasing a lot of things from your body. And people who struggle with things like constipation, it's because they're usually holding on to something that they don't want to let go of. And so I actually do a lot of emotional work in there, because people can become emotionally constipated. It's a thing. And that is what I'm talking about. It's like, if you are emotionally holding on to all your stuff and you're not moving it through, it's eventually going to turn into a health thing. But once we move all this through and we get everything out of the way, now we're ready to charge up the nuclear power plant. This is where you can do cold plunges, you can do HIIT classes, you can start to give the mitochondria all the nutrients we need, because we've now kind of moved into the energetic body. We've moved past all this stuff that's like holding us down, and we've moved into giving the body energy, charging it up, and optimizing the life force. And as we do this, immediately after this comes hormones, which I call optimize, because it's about optimizing communication. We often don't need to give any hormones at this point, because your body has already done all of the work and it has moved everything through the system. Therefore, the communication signals between cells, which are hormones, generally self-correct. And we don't really need to do a ton with them unless people choose to for optimization. So this is why I very rarely will ever suggest hormones first, unless it's like a really dire situation, because they're just duct tape over the check engine light. We need to check the engine before we hide all the signals from it. So if we go through this cycle and you go through that order, you will inevitably become healthy, because this is what nature designed. This is how our body works. But there's so many nuances that I've learned from practice and my own healing journey hidden in there, in this methodology that I developed from going through this experience with my own body and feeling it in my cells, which nothing teaches you like going through something in your own body, which is why I have so much empathy for people going on the health journey. It is scary and traumatizing and nobody gets it. And it's even more terrifying when your brain won't work and when your body won't work, and then you're going through that identity crisis. So if I can help people understand that everybody heals the same, like you might need different things along the way, but the mechanism is the same, and it's actually quite simple. And as we go through each of these systems, you just apply the IHEAL model to it, right? So even if we go all the way back to the gut, what's the intention that I have for my gut? What needs to be done? What needs to be removed? What needs to be added? How can we challenge it? Move on to the immune system. What's the intention for my immune system? What needs to be looked at? What needs to be removed? What needs to be added? What needs to be challenged? And you go through that for every single cycle. You will heal the cycles because you're going through organ systems in the order that nature designed them to support each other, and applying nature's most foundational healing mechanism to the organ system itself. And this is what I lovingly call the IHEAL methodology foundation, with the 8 cycles, which I call the Regenerative Catalyst System, because it literally will regenerate itself if you give it the right things at the right time. And with this knowledge, anybody with any condition can heal themselves. Thank you for being here and reclaiming your health sovereignty. If you feel ready for deeper guidance and reconnecting to your inner intelligence and finally not going the journey alone, I created the Wellness Evolution community for that exact purpose, for you. It is a place rooted in education, foundational physiology, and community support where you can learn to trust your body again. Visit www.wellnessevolutioncommunity.com for a free quiz to find out where your body is at in your healing stages.